So we start now with IPELTU, looking at preservation as long-term usability, since this is how OAIS defines preservation, long-term understandability and usability. People talk a lot about metadata, but the problem is that this word means different things to different people. In fact, the use of that word wastes a great deal of time by causing confusion with people thinking they're talking about the same thing, whereas in fact they're talking about completely different things. OAIS specifies various types of information and minimum amounts of each of these types of information. Maybe we should call it meta information, since each of these are information objects. The OAIS and these are things that the OAIS archive must have. Of particular importance are provenance and representation information. There may just be small amounts of these initially. Provenance may be very simply that I got this thing from Mr. X. But of course it will be added to over time as the archive takes actions to ensure preservation. Representation information may also be very simple, depending upon the definition of the designated community, but will also be added to and may be changed over time. But of course, the more you have at the start, the better. So it's better to have more provenance than simply saying, I got it from over there. Why do I say that? Well, because if only a minimum of provenance is available to give to the archive, then it may be more difficult for the archive to provide convincing evidence of authenticity. Also, it may be difficult to reproduce results. IPELTU aims to help as much of this to be collected as possible. A similar case can be made for collecting as much representation information as possible, as well as all the other pieces of information OAIS defines. We want to apply this to all the different kinds of ways in which information is created or collected, from the largest projects such as space satellites to very small one-person projects. How can we do this? A little background. There are two important inputs we should acknowledge, namely the project management body of knowledge, PMBOK, and the data management body of knowledge, DMBOK. PMBOK in particular identified an approach to break down a project, whether very small or very large, into first phases which can be carried out by the same person or team, or could be carried out by a completely different set of people thousands of miles away. Then each piece of work is broken down into initiating and then a loop of planning and executing. And when these are complete, then closing and handing on to the next part of the project. And we can see here phases with different numbers of these sort of loops. The following draws on these widely applicable project phases and cycles as a framework for the digital preservation checklists. In the following slides, there are lots of details that you do not have need to read now. They can be read later. In this presentation, I have only time to give a brief overview. A checklist is something used to make sure that things are not forgotten. Not everything in the checklist must be done. Some things may purposely be omitted, but at least they should be considered. Here, for instance, is part of the checklist for a scientific data project, for example, an astronomical satellite. These are some examples under each of the initiating, planning, executing, and closing when thinking about a data object, part of the OEIS information object. More examples about other components required for an OEIS AIP and some things not part of an OEIS AIP but which may be important. An example of phases which might be carried out for a small project. And each of the initiating, planning, executing, closing cycles. And a large project, which would be expected to be more complex and have more phases. So I hope these slides give you a flavor of what IPELTU contains and what it aims to do. In summary, IPELTU is designed to help organizations and projects to collect information which may be needed to preserve the what comes out of those activities. In the standard, examples have been collected from a number of areas during the review, or perhaps in future issues. Examples could include web archiving. In fact, maybe I should ask if there are any volunteers here in the audience who would contribute to that part of the document. So now we've got some time for questions about IPELTU.